So Zach Wilson is really bad. It's something we've known for years. He just has not been very good in the NFL, and it's time to talk about him again. The Jets, they whiffed on that second overall pick back in 2021. And despite having a pretty good roster, New York needed to figure something out at quarterback because Wilson wasn't getting it done. They went out, they tried to fix everything with Aaron Rodgers, and then he ruptured his Achilles on his fourth snap of the season. Zach Wilson, who was supposed to get this entire year to just sit behind Aaron Rodgers, get to learn a little bit, try to develop his game. Instead, he went the full offseason training as the backup, getting snaps as the backup, and suddenly was thrown right back out into the fire. And it wasn't very difficult to see that he just wasn't very good. He was not the answer for the Jets. The Jets probably should have gone and gotten some extra quarterback help before the deadline, or even just signed somebody, and they just didn't. You know, the trade deadline came and went, and they didn't do a single thing at quarterback. There was no backup plan whatsoever if they needed to bench Zach Wilson. And the time has finally come. The Jets have benched Zach Wilson for Tim Boyle, which is so rock bottom. There is nothing more rock bottom than getting benched for Tim Boyle. Not only was Wilson benched, but he's now the third string quarterback behind not just Tim Boyle, but also Trevor Siemian. Now that, just objectively, in the nicest way, is hilarious. It really is just over for Zach Wilson. You know, if I had to actually take a guess now, I do think he gets released and hopefully gets some kind of fresh start in the offseason, and I do think he's going to get signed in some kind of capacity. He did have so much potential at a point, but someday people are seriously going to look back and just study what happened to Zach Wilson. Yes, there were definitely concerns when he was coming out of BYU that he didn't really have to deal with pressure and he was playing with weaker talent, but still, I mean, this guy looks like he has completely forgotten how to play football. Arm talent doesn't just disappear, but that's apparently what's happened. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Hindsight is always 20/20, and I do think Wilson was a good prospect to a degree. You know, the arm was there. That was the best part of his game, and if he truly did put it all together and have good coaching, I think he still could have been pretty good in the pros. And even now, there have actually been some pretty cool flashes. He's just never been able to be consistent or particularly good. Zach Wilson has started as many games this season as he did last season now, which is 9. In both years, he's thrown just 6 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. The good news is his completion percentage is up to 59.2 from 54.5. The bad news, he has fumbled 9 times and lost 5 of them. Both are career highs. He only lost 1 fumble all last season. There hasn't exactly been progression or improvements since his rookie season, and that's what's concerning. He did start 13 games as a rookie, and he had 9 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. He was bad, but so was a lot of the talent around him. You know, he even led the league with 370 sack yards. It wasn't pretty, and it really hasn't gotten any better. Zach Wilson is a guy that I really would like to see succeed in the NFL. I didn't mind him in college. He was kind of just this almost one-year wonder guy. He was a very fun prospect, and I understand, again, why teams fell in love with him, but it hasn't worked at all, and he hasn't even been set up to succeed. Now, you really have to wonder if this is the end for Zach Wilson. There's been plenty of times already where you had to sit back and wonder if he would ever see the field again in the NFL. I certainly didn't think he'd get another shot after Aaron Rodgers came in. Maybe if he did develop in that year under Rodgers, then I guess maybe. But now it feels like this is really it. Once you get benched for Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian, it really feels over. And now all eyes turn to Tim Boyle. Now, the Jets definitely had the worst quarterback in football over, the past few weeks, but they also may have the worst backup in football. In all of his career, Tim Boyle has thrown 3 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He's bounced around, but he started 3 total career games, all of which were with the Lions back in 2021, and it was not pretty. Now, the funniest thing about Tim Boyle is that he wasn't even good in college. Usually generally, when you look at guys in the NFL, even ones that are not very good at quarterback, they were still usually incredible at the college level before coming to the pros, and usually were at a power school, and, you know, if they're able to make the league in any capacity, that's usually what you expect. But that's not even the case with Tim Boyle. He had 1 touchdown and 13 interceptions in 3 years at UConn. Of course, a college football powerhouse. UConn, of course, 1 touchdown, 13 interceptions. He then transferred to Eastern Kentucky and had a breakout season. 11 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. That was enough for him to get an undrafted contract. He ended up making the Packers 53-man roster the next season after he had a pretty good preseason. He was on the Packers until 2021, and he signed with the Lions. Then he was on the Bears right before he signed with the Jets in April. Now, he didn't actually make the roster, but he did go on the practice squad and eventually was activated in mid-September. I get that Zach Wilson is not getting it done, and you need to find another option here at quarterback, see if you can win some games. I just don't think that's Tim Boyle. I think for as bad as Zach Wilson is, I think you can still maybe make a legitimate argument that Wilson is going to be a better off behind center than Tim Boyle. We're going to have to wait and see, but it's just ugly in New York, man. They should have had some other option here. You look at some of these guys that got traded and signed all throughout this season. Everybody points at the Josh Dobbs getting traded to the Vikings. The Jets had their chance to sign some guys like Carson Wentz, who's now with the Rams. They could have signed somebody. They could have traded for somebody. They simply didn't. And now that it's finally time to move on from Zach Wilson, even though they probably should have a long time ago, Robert Saleh knows that, they're finally making the move to move on. All of a sudden, the Jets just look absolutely terrible because they didn't plan. And you probably should have planned to move on from Zach Wilson if he was your starter. Of course, Trevor Siemian has now jumped him on the depth chart as well. Really, it just feels like he pops up on a new roster every single time I hear about him nowadays. He started a game for the Bears last season, started 4 for the Saints in 2021, 1 for the Jets in 2019, and then is best known for his 24 starts with the Broncos over the 2016 and 2017 seasons. Now, he was technically the Peyton Manning replacement after he retired, which wasn't very pretty, but honestly, good for Trevor Siemian for still being in the league. I think most people didn't even think he'd get drafted. He literally had a commercial real estate job lined up after he was coming out of Northwestern because he didn't think he'd get drafted. The Broncos ended up taking him in the 7th round, and he's still in the league. That was a long time ago, so good for him. The Jets quarterbacks are just such a fucking mess, and honestly, it's a little funny, but the question now becomes when or if Aaron Rodgers is going to come back at all this season. Rodgers told the Jets he wants to return to practice on December 2nd. That is coming up very, very soon. But let's also be completely real here. Let's be reasonable. If the Jets lose on Friday to the Dolphins, they are going to be 4-7. At that point, the playoff window may be closed, especially in the AFC. If the playoffs are out of sight, or you're probably not going to get there without like winning out, there certainly is no point in rushing him back if you aren't fighting for the postseason anymore. Rodgers is about to turn 40 years old, and he's coming off of a ruptured Achilles. You probably shouldn't rush him back. You gotta feel for the Jets, man. It's such a wasted season for the team with such a good roster. You have to feel for Aaron Rodgers. You know, Zach Wilson was just a mess. Robert Saleh rode him for too long, and that may have just simply ruined the Jets' season. But at least for now, it's time to turn our sights and let Tim Boyle cook. Thanks for watching the video. If you don't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Follow us on social media at JDProdNFL. Follow me on social media at DIIDLAKE. And let me know what you think about the Jets situation. Do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back or not? If they lose on Friday and they go 4-7, do you think he should come back? The answer, I think, should definitely be no, but you never know. Aaron Rodgers may just, he thinks he's smarter than everybody else. Maybe he is. I don't know, but if he is even able to come back, respect. But the last thing you want to do is have this guy mess up his Achilles again and simply just not be able to play next year. I mean, that could be the end of his career. Let me know what you think about Rodgers in the comments. We'll see you guys in the next one. Happy Thanksgiving.